How long did you played in the Boston Symphony as concertmaster? How long were you with them for?
I was in the Boston Symphony for 29 years. 22 of those years were as concertmaster.
Okay. And before that?
I started out in the last chair in the second violins.
In the Boston Symphony?
Before that, I was a member of the Houston Symphony.
Okay.
And I went to the Philadelphia Orchestra for a year.
Okay.
And then for 1 year, I went to the Denver Symphony as concertmaster. I wanted to have some concertmaster experience, and I must say that it really was not very satisfying after playing in a great orchestra like the Philadelphia.
Right.
So I decided, well, I better get back into the big leagues. And I was fortunate enough that the year that I wanted to get back into the big leagues, there were vacancies in the Boston Symphony, and I was fortunate enough to be hired by Charles Minch to join the violin section.
Is that pretty typical? I've noticed a lot of violinists, when they go from a section position and they want to go to a concertmaster position, they'll go somewhere else first where there's an opening and then try to get back into a bigger orchestra.
I don't know.
Is it?
I think the picture has changed appreciably now, because when I was going into the musical profession, to the orchestral world, we had really what was called the Big Five.
Right.
Beyond the Big Five, you had also orchestras such as Minnesota, St. Louis, Cincinnati, Baltimore. These orchestras were on what we call the second tier.
Okay.
But there was a big difference, not only economically, but there was quite a difference from an artistic standpoint. The Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Philharmonic, Chicago, Cleveland group were really the elite orchestras. And most everybody aspired to be a member of those orchestras. Positions did not change very frequently in those years. The expression was, I'm going to retire into the Boston Symphony. Because once you have one of those positions, first of all, you felt an involvement in the institution. I always felt that with the Boston Symphony. I felt I was very, very fortunate to be a member of an institution that had the history of the BSO. I mean, after all, I was playing the Boston Symphony when it celebrated its 100th anniversary.
Right.
So you really had a feeling that you had a vested interest in the future of the institution. Today, you have a bunch of orchestras that play really very beautifully. I'm always so delighted to hear the quality of playing that you hear in orchestras that are perhaps not so prestigious, and yet they play very beautifully. If you were to listen, let's say, of the top 20 orchestras, 10 of them playing the same work in the same hall on a given evening, it might be not so easy to tell the difference. Yes, obviously the solo playing that you're going to hear in an orchestra such as the BSO or the Philadelphia. It's playing of a high virtuoso standard, but that's not to say that you're not going to hear it, not only in all of the orchestras in this country, but in other countries as well. So the pattern of saying, okay, I'm going to go be a concertmaster in a small orchestra so I can get a job like that in a big orchestra, I don't think it exists anymore.
Okay.
I dare say that there are people who are being considered for the job of concertmaster of the New York Philharmonic who have very limited concertmaster experience.
Yeah, I saw some of that.
This has gone by. Could you share with us some of your memorable experiences with the conductors and soloists that you worked with when you were sitting in that chair?
Well, I had the great privilege of playing with some of the most prestigious conductors of the last half of the 20th century. The only ones that I never played with, either in the section or as concertmaster, were Arturo Toscanini and George Sell. I played with everybody else. Played many times with Mr. Bernstein, many times with Bernard Haitink, with Sir Colin Davis, Daniel Barenbaum, Ricard Muti, Claudio Abbado, Sir John Barbaroli, many times with Stokowski. Actually played concertos with Stokowski, played concertos with Ormandy, who by all standards, I would have to say was the best accompanist of anybody. He was just superb. And anybody who had the opportunity to play a concerto with Ormandy would back me up on that. Memorable experiences. I mean, there were one every week.
Right.
It's very hard to say that. Making recordings in the orchestra with Jascha Heifetz would have to be a pole star for me. We recorded 3 concerti with him while I was in the orchestra. And seeing his command, his concentration, and his incredible laser-like integrity about what he was doing was so exemplary. He was our hero, and he did nothing in most recording sessions to dispel the notion of his heroism. The violinist that we played with, whom I enjoyed playing with very much, had the opportunity of playing the Mozart Sinfonia Concertant, both with Henrik Schering and with Pingus Zuckerman, on violin and viola. Played many times with Isaac Stern. Henrik Schering was wonderful to play with. Certainly playing with Milstein, with Menuhin, with Francescatti. David Oistrakh in his first tour of the United States, Leonard Cohen, when he recorded Khachaturian and Samson Havanez with us with the orchestra. And it would take me hours to enumerate the most memorable experiences. I would say playing the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto with Kurt Masur was a very high spot for me. Playing the Beethoven with Klaus Tenstedt was a high spot for me. Certainly playing the Brahms in Carnegie Hall with Stokowski was a very high spot for me. Playing the Prokofiev G minor concerto with the Boston Symphony in my first concert in Carnegie Hall, that was pretty special. So I've been a very lucky guy then.
What do you think is the most important aptitude or ability in order to be a concertmaster?
The ability to sense what the conductor wants and to be able to do it with enough emphasis so that he feels that his or her message is getting through, and with enough emphasis so that the people sitting behind you sense what you're doing. Because you're the messenger. It's a messenger not only to your section but to the conductor, because you have to make the conductor feel as though the message is being delivered. Now that's not something that you have to do so much by physical gesture, but certainly by the shape of your playing. William Steinberg once said to me, and he was certainly a marvelous conductor and a great man to work with, said to me one day, "You're playing everything louder, softer, longer, and shorter than anybody in the section." And I said, "I thought that was my job." And he says, "It is, but don't do it too well."
I was actually along those lines. I've noticed different concertmasters, like even between like the BSO and New York Phil. Some tend to, like on a physical level, just give the basic cues, like main entrances. Some tend to really physically show, like you said, almost everything. Is there a right way or a wrong way to do it, or?
Look, one conductor on the stage is quite enough. There are certain players who are physically more demonstrative than others. It's very important that you portray a level of energy in your playing. It's not necessary for you to throw yourself all over the place. And the people in the section are counting minutes. They don't need for you to go boom. They don't need for you to show that.
Okay.
But what they need for you to show is the energy of your playing. If it's a passage in fortissimo, they have to sense physically. And for some people, it's necessary to be more demonstrative than others. I don't know whether when I look at some of the Evening of Symphony tapes, I don't know that I was any more demonstrative than anybody else, but it's pretty obvious that I'm playing. So that's what I feel.
Yeah, okay.
The best concertmaster that I ever worked with or saw was Misha Mishalov. And Misha was not demonstrative. The fiddle just sat there, but you knew he was playing. And boy, did he play. And he played every note with conviction and intensity and with concentration, and you sensed that. So it wasn't necessary for him to throw himself around.
Right. Never thought of it. Okay, this is about orchestral auditions, basically. I've looked at the BSO list, rep list for auditions, and it's very long. They have they don't specify movements all the time. It'll just say Brahms 4, Prokofiev classical, and you have a month to prepare. How do you organize or structure your practicing to make sure that you are ready with all of that repertoire for the audition?
You learn it. You think the BSO audition is tough? Take a look at the Metropolitan Opera audition.
But
if I wanted to audition for the Met Orchestra, I would have to take 2 months of very intensive study. Look, there's nothing on the Boston Symphony repertoire list that's not standard.
Right.
Simple as that. You learn it. If it's going to be the usual suspects.
Right.
After all, there are certain passages in the classical symphony that you know they're going to ask for. That does not mean that you can't learn the whole last movement, because it's fun to know it. Now, let me tell you, when you know these things and then you play them in the orchestra, it's a kick, because, well, I got this.
Yeah.
And you can listen to what's going on. You can enjoy the music. You're not struggling playing your part.
Right.
If they say Brahms 4, learn it. There's a lot to play in it. It's not an easy piece. There are technical challenges in that by surmounting them, you will improve your playing.
Okay.
And remember, an orchestral audition is not playing a lot of notes. It's playing rhythm and dynamics and articulation. That's because many of the people who are sitting behind that screen are not violinists.
Right.
They're listening on different levels. And even when I listened recently to this competition in Paris, every judge brought their own set of ears. So certainly in an orchestral audition, a trombone player is going to bring a totally different perspective than a viola player.
Of course.
Or a violinist, or a cellist, or a double bass player. So what are the elements that are essential that you display? Rhythm, dynamics, articulation, intonation. I mean, you can be the most elegant player in the world if you play the whole audition mezzo piano. It isn't going to make any impression at all. And remember, dynamics are relative.
Right.
If your soft is very soft, your loud is going to sound plenty loud.
And along the same lines with auditions, I know some people have said, I guess this relates to sound. I've heard don't play like a soloist.
What does that mean?
But then that's...
What does that mean? Can you tell me precisely, don't play like a soloist?
I think they're referring to the idea of like don't play out as much, and that's why I was always confused as to
May I tell you that is a totally ridiculous remark. Don't play like a soloist. That's like Sasha Snyder used to say, don't play orchestra.
Yeah, I've heard that too, but it's like...
he was saying don't play orchestra because he didn't want you to play dry. He wanted you to play with involvement. Of course play like a soloist. When you play the slow movement of the Jupiter Symphony, you want to play it as if you're playing the slow movement of the Fifth Violin Concerto. Don't play everything in the first position, play beautifully.
Because yeah, that's the other thing that I've heard before, like play, use lower positions or like,
It's nonsense. It's nonsense. If you display a certain amount of color in your playing and beauty in your playing, you're going to be that much more convincing.
Okay.
May I tell you that open E string in the Philadelphia Orchestra was against the law. If you played an open E string, Mr. Ormandy would catch you and say, don't do that. He would nail you right there on the stage in the middle of rehearsal. No open E string. Got a fourth finger using.
That's very useful.
Now, when you're taking an audition, there's usually not so much time beforehand for you to feel warmed up or have gotten comfortable on stage. How do you suggest is the best way to manage that sort of panic and the feeling of all your thoughts flying from your head right as soon as you get on stage?
Practicing so that your concentrated faculties are honed well is very important. The distraction of an audition, of wondering what are those people behind that screen saying? Oh, look at this hall. I've never played for that music before. The whole thing it's a very daunting experience. There's a very important thing. When you're preparing for that audition, think about the feelings that you have when you're playing. Concentrate on your right thumb. See if you can really sense your right thumb. Think about the fingers in your left hand. Think about where is the bow tracking? Is it close to the fingerboard, close to the wrist? Start to work on your concentration, because the only way to handle performance anxiety is concentration, because it's just a distraction. You go out on the stage, particularly in Symphony Hall in Boston, where they keep the lights on, you see all those faces looking at you. I mean, what are you going to do? All right, close your eyes. Concentrate. Concentrate. Concentrate on the sound. Hear the sound you're producing. Think about what the next note is going to be. It's being involved in a very conscious way in what you're doing is the best defense against nerves. And we all have nerves. Believe me, I'm certainly not a youngster, and I've played a few concerts in my life, and there are times when a concert means a lot to me, and I can get very nervous, and I have to know how to control it. Because everybody will look, what, he's nervous? Oh, come on. Yes, I do. Because I want to, it's that little voice that's sitting over here and says, it was okay this morning at home, but it's not going to be so good this evening. That voice is there. It's there for me, it's there for you, but you have to quiet that voice, and you quiet it by concentration.
I remember we had a concertmaster from a younger generation come to talk to us a couple years ago, and what he said was about nerves and nervousness was that from his perspective it seemed like everyone used beta blockers.
Don't even think about it. Don't even think about it. You know why? Once you take one and you have what you think is a good experience, you're not going to go on the stage again without it. Don't even think about it, because that extra little bit of adrenaline is a very important element of your performance. No, that is a big no-no. Not that I'm against pharmacology, you understand, but I think that's a huge mistake. That's as big a mistake as having a drink or smoking pot before a concert. There's no difference. Would you do either of those? Certainly not. So why take a beta blocker?
Have you met people in your experience who do either of those?
Yes. And I think that had they taken a placebo, they probably would have had the same
Along the same lines of like performance anxiety. I know from my personal experience, whenever I have to memorize a lot of works, like especially for a competition where you have, 3 or 4 hours of repertoire, I'm always worried about memory slips. And that tends to almost take over like everything else that like I'm thinking about. Like I stop thinking about my performance, but I'm like, what if I forget that one treble spot in the Sibelius concerto?
There is a very, very big difference between playing something by heart and something from memory. Big difference. Memorization as a technique depends on whether you need mnemonic devices to help you out. I feel that most of you try to memorize by a rote system, by repetition. The best way to memorize something is to know how it's made. If you understand the form of a Bach fugue, and you understand the episodes and how it's structured, you memorize it very easily. But if you try to memorize it by playing it through over and over and over again, it isn't going to work. Because at one point or another, your concentration will lapse, and you'll go take a wrong turn, and you'll end up in dead end.
That's usually what happens with me, especially with like Bach fugues, for example.
Well, they're very carefully structured. And if you practice them in a way in which you differentiate between the various episodes of the fugue and how they work,
right,
you'll find, gee, I know where I am. You don't need a GPS to know what part of the fugue you're in.
Right.
There's always those spots where a passage begins the same way, and then the first time it appears it has a different resolution. The second time is a different way.
Isolate those places. Isolate them and practice them in sequence. So that you know, look, I had to memorize the finale of the Dvorak violin concerto the first time I did it. I had, because the theme happens 6-7 times. And it's never always the same. So I had A1, A2, A3, A4, and I practiced them in sequence. So I remembered, oh, this is the difference between A1 and A2.
Okay.
It's very methodical. But if you need a mnemonic device, it always has to be the structure.
What's your opinion on, I know there's muscle memory, I tend to use photographic memory a lot.
You close your eyes and see the page?
Yeah.
I don't do that.
I can't do that. I've never
I don't do that.
been able to do it all the time.
I remember what I read. I remember what I see. I remember what walls certain paintings are on in certain museums that I've been to. So I do have a very, very strong photographic recall, but I don't use it for music.
Okay.
I use my ear for music.
Okay.
And I can tell you what wall the Vermeer Milkmaid is on in the Frick collection. I know which wall it's on. All right? I can close my eyes and you could blindfold me and lead me into that museum and I'd take you right there. But I don't do that with music because all of my musical memory is ear memory.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
So I'm no help at all.
I think I remember a story you told me about one of the recording sessions with Heifetz when each night he was playing a different fingering to test out which one he wanted to do.
It was when he played the Beethoven concerto with us. The gentleman who was sitting on the second stand of the second violins, Mr. Sam Diamond, was sick. And I was, in those days, the last chair was the move-up man. So whoever was out, I would occupy that seat. So I was sitting about as far from Mr. Heifetz as you are from me. And he rehearsed the concerto, and we performed it on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And we recorded it on Sunday. The rehearsal and the 3 concerts, I could see that he used slightly different fingerings. It sounded exactly the same, but it was quite apparent that he was looking for the solution that he was going to use when he recorded.
Wow.
On the other hand, you get somebody like Mr. Perlman, who uses different fingerings all the time. I do, because I don't like to mark fingerings in my music. I like clean music. But Itzhak changes fingerings all the time. He's very spontaneous that way. Hillary doesn't change fingerings, but her playing is perfection itself. So
Yeah.
different strokes.
Oh, this is about, it's not directly related to orchestra, but in terms for students, you know, everyone has their own like dreams and goals career-wise. A lot of people, you know, they want to do orchestra, some want to do chamber music. And I know some teachers in the past, they've told me, look, if you want to do orchestra, you don't need to focus as much on solo repertoire and doing competitions. And right now, like I'm working with Irina, and she was the one who suggested that I do competitions and focus on solo repertoire. Even though I do want to do orchestra, she said that it's just better because I would be a more well-rounded musician in the end. What is your opinion on?
Well-roundedness?
Well, not well-roundedness, but you know, if you're aiming to be in an orchestra, how much?
Let's put it very bluntly. You're aiming to have a life in music.
Right.
Is that right?
Right.
A life in music implies teaching,
And
playing in an orchestra, playing chamber music, playing solos, playing benefit concerts, creating musical events for charity. That's a
Right.
life in music,
right.
right? So anything that you do with the instrument in your hand, whether it's solo,
Beneficial.
or preparing a chamber music concert, learning how to live with in a community of colleagues in a performance of, let's say, a Mendelssohn octet.
Right.
This is all preparation for having a life in music. Making presentations in the public schools, that's preparing yourself for a life in music. That's what I've had. It was great.
Yeah.
I mean, there isn't anything I haven't done. And I've enjoyed it all because I love music, I love playing the violin. And if I get up in the morning and say, well, that's a fun thing to do, I think I'll play the violin. Really, I love it. And I've been fortunate enough that life has given me the opportunity to play the violin in any number of situations. So I have had a life in music, and that's what you prepare yourself for. You can't be a one-crop farmer.
Right.
What do you like to do outside of music?
Well, I like to play tennis. I like to play golf. I love to go to museums with my wife. I like to play bridge. I think it's fairly apparent that I like to eat. I like to cook. I like to do a lot of things. Fortunately, I have a companion in my wife who likes to do a lot of the same things that I like to do. So we do things together. We share a great love of art, and she is a great lover of playing bridge. I like to play bridge more, not as much she does, but I like to play. And I like to play tennis. I wish I was a better player. I used to play golf a lot, but my wife doesn't play golf, so now I play tennis with her.
Compromise. Tonight your master class is about Mozart, and the last one that you came, you did Bach. I think there's a lot of composers out there that we're told to come into their music with this whole differently formed mindset, depending on like, you know, this is what grace notes mean in this composer's music. This is their definition of forte, fortissimo dynamics, the range that they use. What do you think are some of the merits or drawbacks of trying to take that approach?
You know, trying to put yourself into the ethos of the composer at the time that they wrote the music.
Yeah.
I think it's a great advantage to it. Having had the experience of playing on a Baroque violin quite a bit, hi, honey. Oh, that's okay, sweetie. I'm just finishing up this interview with the kids. Well, you know, if you don't put it in a lot, you know, don't worry about it. I mean, there's no baseball game tonight, so it won't cost a fortune. All right? Yeah, I leave it to your discretion. You know, be nice. You know, if you don't get a place right away, honey, don't worry about coming immediately to dinner, all right? Do the best you can, okay? Just remember Shmuel's lady. Okay. All right, hon. I'll see you later. Bye-bye. Okay. Where were we? About periods. Okay. Having played on the Baroque instrument and also playing with a Baroque bow and a transitional bow, I've learned certain things about what tempi and what kind of articulation were really pretty much possible with those instruments. Which is not to say that playing that music on a modern instrument isn't perfectly okay. I do feel, however, that there are certain elements in music that should remain sacrosanct. Tempo and articulation. If we're playing a Bach adagio, and we know that the Baroque bow had an effective playing length, which was somewhat shorter than what we had, you know you can't play it very slowly. If you're playing Mozart, you know that a very fast spiccato isn't going to work with the bow. If the bow bounced, but it didn't go that fast. If you add to the articulation and tempo, which we can surmise pretty much in the general ballpark what it was, if you add the greater dynamic range that we have available to us in the modern instrument, then you're not taking anything away from the music. On the other hand, I feel if you play this music at a tempo and with articulation, which is substantially different from what was possible with the equipment that it was written for, or the aesthetic of that time, I think that's a mistake. We have a very, very good continuous stream of information. Probably the most valuable stream of information is in 4 books. Gemignani, Leopold Mozart, Tartini's book on ornamentation, and Baillot, The Art of the Violin. That really gives us pretty much an idea of what was going on, because you can go right through from 1751 right through into the 19th century. And for example, Baillot's description of the playing of his teacher, Viotti, is a very, very valuable comment. There is also in the introduction to the translation of Baillot, there's a wonderful letter from Hector Berlioz from 1827, hearing, or 1829 I guess, hearing Beethoven's C-sharp minor quartet performed by Baillot's quartet. This is just shortly after the piece was written, right? For an audience of 300 people, and Berlioz says there were not more than 6 people in that whole room who had any idea of the greatness of that music. So it took a while.
I know a lot of the older recordings and the older editions of music left out pieces of the articulation or the style of the time. Does that diminish our appreciation at all of those recordings?
Not at all. I just recently listened to a recording of Jacques Thibault playing Mozart's Fifth Concerto conducted by Charles Minch. And I started to laugh because I realized that I played Mozart's Fifth Concerto with Charles Minch. And that recording was from when I was a little boy. It was very different. It was very different from the way we play Mozart now. First of all, when I studied that, I studied it from the edition by Joseph Joachim. Joseph Joachim did not take scholarship in relation to Mozart nearly as seriously as we do. He was very serious in his scholarship in his edition of the Beethoven string quartets. But on the other hand, he wasn't about the Beethoven violin concerto. We have become much more true to the text. First of all, we have editions available to us now, which I didn't have as a student. There was no Barenreiter. There were no facsimiles of the Bach solo sonatas. I have the facsimile of all the manuscripts of the Mozart violin concertos. I didn't have that. We've got it now. You can look at it. You can see the notes as put on the page by the composer. So now, extrapolating that and looking at music by Mozart in the same tonality from a later period, oh, I see what he did here, I see what he did there, I see what he... Now I know what I'm going to do. But your guess as to how you're going to articulate that is a much more educated guess. Much more educated than it was for people like some of my idols. I mean, nobody loves the playing of Fritz Kreisler any more than I do. But when Fritz Kreisler was playing and Isaiah was playing, those people, they didn't take it that seriously. It wasn't, I'm going to play an authentic Mozart. They didn't even think in those terms. Which, by the way, does not take away anything from the beauty of the playing, the tonal beauty of the playing. And when I listen to those tones, I immediately bring to my mind the singing of Tito Schipa and Beniamino Gigli and Jerzy Berling and John McCormick. I hear that sound. I hear that wonderful vocal sound that they had. And I miss it in many of the contemporary performers. They got great chops, but they don't make such a nice noise.
I hear some people attribute that to the popularity of the shoulder rests in modern times.
Come on. What, the shoulder rest is keeping people from making a beautiful tone? I use the shoulder rest. I think I've got nice tone. Hillary uses shoulder rest. She got a gorgeous tone. Shoulder rest, yes or no. If you need it, use it. If you don't, don't. Simple as that. Has absolutely no effect. And you know, we did at one point at Yale years ago an analysis of whether the shoulder pad or the shoulder dampened the sound. Very seriously measured with electronic instruments. Didn't make no difference.
This is about practicing. In your opinion, is there such a thing as over-practicing? Or
No. There's such a thing as practicing which is not productive.
Right.
That's bad. I have a couple of rules. I've distributed my little tips from the old fiddler. And if you practice if you're practicing as mindless repetition, you might as well not do it. First of all, you're not practicing concentration. And as I've always said, playing a scale without A rhythmic and dynamic plan is a waste of time. Do I use the metronome? You bet I do, because I don't trust myself for a second. The metronome is a great challenge. You can't negotiate with it.
So, I mean, I've walked past practice rooms before, and I've heard you, you know, playing scales in thirds or, you know, practicing. What inspires you when you're like at the level that you're at to sit down and, you know, do that kind of tedious
I
practicing?
want to get better. I want to get better. I want to be able to do more. I want to be able to have more color in my playing. I want to be able to shape a phrase more beautifully. I hope I'm getting better. I mean, I can tell you right now there are things that I can do on the instrument today that I couldn't do 25 years ago. Maybe that's because the idea has occurred to me. I talk about this frequently. When I was a student, we did not play the last rose of summer. We did not play the Earl King. Not that we couldn't have done it, but nobody expected us to do it. At that time, Roger Bannister had not run a 4-minute mile. Wow, the day he did that, huh? Well, all of these kids that come to audition for Curtis are all running 4-minute miles. Could I play the Soiree Cadenza when I was 8 years old? I don't know. I played the Scherzo Tarantella when I was 8. Because my father gave me the music and he didn't tell me it was too hard. So, a lot of it is expectations. And I hear things in my mind when I'm listening to music in my mind, which I do a lot. I listen to an ideal shaping of a phrase in my mind's ear. I pick up the instrument, I want to do it. I heard these kids playing in Paris at that competition. I heard some things in the Schubert B minor round. I said, boy, that's a nice idea. I'm going to try that. Saw some fingerings. I know I changed my fingerings to the box sonatas all the time. So that's what inspires me. The delusion that progress is possible.
I don't have any more questions.
Okay, I'm going to go meet my wife for dinner.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.